Twisted Metal first released in the fall of 1995. It was one of the big non-Japanese games to even arrive for PlayStation, along with the game Warhawk. Never played Warhawk, but now I have played Twisted Metal. So in the lead up to the show, which is on the 27th, very excited for that, just to kind of see whatever in God's name they managed to do with it. I'll be watching and reviewing every episode on Podcast Now Plus. But with that show coming out, PlayStation has put the game Twisted Metal 1 and Twisted Metal 2 on PS Plus, so you can play it in its full glory many years later. This game is actually half a year older than me, and I had quite the experience playing it last night, at least when I'm recording this. Played it for several hours and have a few things to say about it. Number one, weirdly addicting, okay? Number two, game doesn't hold up all that well, but I think that kind of makes it special, including the lost endings, which I definitely want to talk about as well in this video. But let's talk about the game itself first, the plots, the setup, and then the gameplay. But first, if you guys do like these videos, and I intend to kind of go even deeper with these videos going forward, make sure you leave a like, make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel for anything I do in the future. Twisted Metal 2 is next. I'm going to actually make a video on that next week right before the show comes out. Okay, so pretty simple concept. I actually kind of like that. I mean, you got to go back and think in the mid-90s, late 90s, how did games kind of get their message through? Well, this wasn't all that unreasonable to do. Pretty much it's just scrolling up in terms of words. I did see people online talking about, and again, I suppose with the lost endings, the difference between the more campiness and kind of going all out with that versus just plain text, right? I do think there's kind of like an atmosphere with this game that's kind of hard to put into words, but you can kind of feel it. It feels dark and twisted, but it also doesn't really take itself all that seriously, that we'll talk about as it goes on. But the general premise is this is a futuristic kind of game. So it came out in 1995. In game, the Twisted Metal, I guess, championship or whatever you want to call it, began in 96, and this is the 10-year anniversary of it. So it's the 10th show. Every year they do this, and it's pretty much just a competition of killing everybody else around you. People from all over the world join, or I guess because of some of the endings, it's kind of implied that they're almost recruited. There's people that go out for Calypso to get these drivers, bring them in, and they compete in the Twisted Metal competition. And then if you win, you get a seat at the table with Calypso, and you get to have anything, and they truly mean anything, that you want. Could be money, could be going back in time, could be reviving somebody, could be anything you want. You get to ask Calypso for it, and Calypso has to do it. Now, there's a catch there that we'll talk about as this video goes on, but that's the simple premise. There's multiple characters. One thing I do like about this game is the diversity of the cast. So there's plenty of different characters through all walks of life, I suppose. There's also all sorts of different vehicles, right? So the vehicles are the most important part. Who is driving the vehicles are not necessarily all that important. Obviously, this is the birthplace of Sweet Tooth, but I knew this, but I never really thought about it too hard. Just so we're all aware, we all know Sweet Tooth is the truck name, right? It's not actually the character. The character's name is Needles Kane, right? Kind of this psychiatric patient that I believe broke out 5 years before the tournament took place and just kind of goes around and eliminates people, let's say, kind of for fun, has no idea what they're mentally unstable, let's say, and they go into the competition. So that's one of the characters. Actually, his father is one of the characters in this game as well, and the father becomes a different, I believe it's called Dark Tooth in the next game. So there's some lore that's kind of built in this game, but it's very like on the ground level. There's not too much. The biggest thing I do believe is kind of the introduction of Sweet Tooth, which again is the truck. It's not actually the character, but all the vehicles are pretty fun to play as. Now, they all have their own special thing. There's only 4 different like attributes in the entire game, so it's not all that detailed. It's not all that deep. A lot of the weaponry you use is the same no matter which vehicle it is, right? Like you all have turrets. Now the turret, how much you can do it, how much you can shoot before it overheats, that changes depending on what vehicle you're in. The handling of the vehicle depends on what vehicle you're in, the armor of the vehicle. So there's not, and I believe speed is the last one. So there's really really not that much that goes into them. But, I got to give them credit. Back in 1995, the game is pretty fun to play. Now, I want to go over just a little bit of the history that I was looking up with this game as well. I kind of find it interesting. So, like I said in the beginning of this video, this was one of the first Western releases on PlayStation. And David Jaffe, who we may know from God of War, obviously from Twisted Metal, what I had read was obviously he was not the easiest to get along with other people, but it finally basically got to work. They were given money, I believe $2 million to work on 2 different games. They worked on Warhawk and they worked on Twisted Metal. I believe Twisted Metal started as kind of a blend of both. You'd be able to fly like fighter jets and be able to shoot down the vehicles that were on land. I think it was supposed to also be like a simulator at some point. Like, it wasn't necessarily going to be a high octane car versus car kind of like derby. I think the idea was crafted when they were in traffic and they thought of, well, what if we just had weapons on our car right now to just take out everybody and get through the traffic? So pretty interesting, pretty fun. And it's not all that like out there. This is basically the Running Man, but it's just it's just like a derby or a championship where things eliminate each other for the grand prize. It had been done before, even in 1995, but with cars and in a game and with this kind of sick, twisted kind of sense of humor and, again, atmosphere. It's a very like weird. Calypso looks kind of scary. These characters look a little odd when you're looking at their vehicle and then you look at the characters themselves. The whole thing is just very, very odd. And then you get into the game. So the game is pretty darn short. It's just about kind of the talent level. Now, I won't hide this. I didn't beat the game in my play time. I got to level 5. There's 6 levels in the game. So basically 6 maps, 6 arenas, whatever you want to call it. And the amount of enemies that you're going to be facing, well, at the end it actually does lower, but it generally increases. So the first map, you face 1 enemy, just one-on-one. Then you face 3, then you face 5, then I believe you face 8, and it just keeps going. But then I think the last level, which is on like a high rise, like a skyscraper or whatever, I think you face like 3 or 4. Then you face the final boss, Minion, who is the winner of the last Twisted Metal Championship, and then that's it. And each character can, win, can beat the game, and there's different endings for each character. So I got to level 5. I got there a couple different times. Level 4 was a big problem to me. You have 3 lives. You have 3 lives in the entire game, and I believe it's kind of difficult. I played on medium. I played on easy. I still couldn't do it even on easy. So you can call me whatever you want to call me in terms of my skill level, but it's quite difficult. I think it's because I'm one where I want to just ram everybody. So I kind of chose bigger vehicles that were able to, hit. The smaller ones, you have to play a very specific way, really, like the motorcycle, Mr. Grimm, or any of the, I guess, cars. You can't just ram into things. You have to focus on your special ability. You have to focus on getting weapons, throughout the map. But it's pretty simplistic in how it works. In fact, I just described it. So you land in a map and you face each other, and you have your turret. You have your special weapon, which every vehicle has a special kind of ability. It'll automatically replenish itself. You also have weapons you can pick up throughout the area. There'll also be people on the street, and these people really got on my nerves, especially I believe the 3rd level, maybe when you're on the highway. These people that just stand there and they either shoot you or they shoot rocket launchers at you. They take an annoying amount of health from you when you're not really paying attention to them because you're trying to focus on the cars, trying to focus on spinning around, and then these people are just doing some damage to you, and it's annoying because I'd like that health back, and then maybe I could have actually beaten the game. But it's actually pretty fun. Like I said in the beginning of the video, it's actually strangely addicting. When I died, I kind of wanted to just immediately go back and do it again. Now that's that's single player mode. It's 1 player. One thing that I didn't do, but I don't want to ignore it. There was a 2-player mode where you'd face off against each other, and I again, in the history of this game, looking back, the game wasn't all that well received. People didn't really think it was all that special. People criticized actually the graphics at the time, saying that it was lazy or just not all that good. The one big thing that people did like about it was the 2-player mode. That was the big thing. The 1-player mode was kind of average. I think the game got a 66 average just in general. So we're not talking about a game that came out and got 95s, was universally loved, but it was kind of edgy. Not everybody was on board. I think part of Sony wasn't even on board with this game. They cut the lost, not even some of them, all of them. They cut the lost endings. There's conflicting reasons why they cut it. We'll talk about that in a second. But this game, not perfect, not perfect in how it is. It's very short. Once you do those 6 maps or whatever, you're done with the game. Now, I couldn't do it, I suppose, so there is still more for me to do, but it is a pretty short game in what it is. But I do think it's fun. I think it's fun using your special abilities. I think the vehicles are different enough. Like I said, I kind of preferred some of the bigger ones. One thing I'd like to throw out, Sweet Tooth, and I'm talking literally about the vehicle here. Sweet Tooth is really not the greatest. It's the one I did first. I played it a few times, but I actually kind of gravitated to either things bigger than it, or I think it was maybe the Warthog, which is kind of like the military-sized kind of like transportation thing. I kind of preferred that one because it has speed, but it also has armor. You can ram things. Sweet Tooth, it's okay. Also, Sweet Tooth's ability of, I believe, Molotov kind of things where you throw it kind of like straight out. It's got a good amount of range. It's good if you hit somebody with it. It does an incredible amount of damage, but it's also pretty hard to aim in this game. Now, let me talk about some of the weaknesses. And so, besides, I guess, like the length and, simplicity for like the setup is fine, but it also probably could have been more, right? So I'd maybe put that as a weakness. Some of the weaknesses of the actual game itself, I'd say the AI first. Like, first and foremost, if I had to kind of sum it up, I'd say the AI, for the simple fact that I felt that I had to do all the work. So I think is it level 4? I think it's maybe level 4, where you're facing like 6 or 8 enemies. And there's a lot, maybe 8 is level 5, so maybe 6 or so enemies. There's a lot of them. And you only have 3 lives throughout the entire thing. So I couldn't get past really level 3 without losing a life. So I was going into level 4, facing however many people that I can't remember right now, and I'd have 2 lives left, right? So you don't have all that much, and if you lose, you lose. You have to restart it at level 1. You could pick your characters and all that stuff. I felt like I had to be the one to take out everybody. Now, maybe it's because I was impatient. Maybe I'm supposed to let the match go longer. But a thing is, as I was saying earlier, the enemies, the guys, the people on the road, they do an annoying amount of damage. You can't really just avoid everything and then kind of come in at last second. That doesn't really work, or it didn't really work for me. Also, you can't really do that because the enemies will not really take each other out. There were a few times. I played this game for about 3 hours. There were only maybe 2 or 3 times in the entirety of that length of time that an enemy AI took out another enemy AI. They took out me plenty of times. I died multiple times throughout this, but the amount of times that I could just kind of let them sort it out themselves, and you could see the marker of how many people were eliminated, the amount of times that the enemy were to do that to somebody else was extremely little. So you can't rely on them taking each other out. You can barely rely on them weakening each other. You really have to be the one to go in and destroy them. Now, sometimes you could get cheap kills. I found Mr. Grimm was one that which is the motorcycle, which is literally the Grim Reaper, which I found pretty funny. One thing you could do with him, I found multiple times is I rode right up behind him, and you could just kind of lay into him multiple times. There are some, maybe it's the AI, the mindset, where you can get behind them and you can kind of lay into them. And so that has happened, and that's a cheap kill. I believe it's the Warthog is the vehicle I'm talking about. When you ram, most times when you ram, you'll kind of they'll fly in the air. It'll be like a one-hit thing. So you'll take a lot of damage, but you can't hit them repeatedly. There's some times where I think the game will glitch and it'll just register that you're hitting them nonstop. So I believe there was one match where I took out, maybe it was Darkseid or maybe it was somebody else. I took them out in maybe 5 seconds because the game thought I was continuing to hit them, which normally the game doesn't give you that. So there are times you can kind of game it like that. There's other times where these enemies, they're not very smart in terms of taking each other out. They are pretty smart when it comes to you, though. They'll do some really weird turns. Also, and I've seen this actually with the reviews, a lot of people criticize the map. I do think the map is extremely bad, and the first little while I was playing it, maybe I even have gameplay of it, I was trying to figure it out. I'm driving, and I'm driving very slowly, and I'm looking at the map, and I'm like, okay, how exactly, where are the people? Where are the streets? How does this map actually work? Once you get it, I do think you get it. I think it's easy to kind of figure out where they are. But another thing with the AI, I guess also capability, the capability of the game, characters will disappear, right? If they're too far away from you, they'll just disappear. You know the conspiracy in life where like you're alone and like the whole world is actually fake. It's just like the Matrix kind of thing, right? It's just you and everybody else is kind of just like digitally there. I felt like that could have happened in this game because there's multiple times where the enemy totally did nothing, right? They weren't stocking up. They weren't attacking each other. They weren't doing literally anything. They wouldn't register, right? Like if you look at the map, they wouldn't register. You would get close to them and they would just like randomly appear. And you know that they weren't even there. They weren't like before that moment that you saw them pull up. They were not like even in the mindset of the game. Do you know what I mean? Kind of like the conspiracy theory to a degree. But that happens a lot. And again, I think that's why they're not really taking each other out. Because for the most part, if they're not in your visibility, if they're not in your field of view, they're not actually there. Like they're literally not there. They don't lose health. They don't attack each other. They don't do anything. And they'll just kind of randomly pull up. Because they'll also do really weird just tracks, like how they maneuver and how they move around. It'll be pretty weird. But I will say, you get one pretty close up to you, they can mess with you quite a bit. They can do spins. Just I think I got pretty okay at spinning myself around, but sometimes they'll spin while you're spinning, so you're both kind of still backwards from each other. They're actually pretty okay if they're in your field of view. The weapons are cool. I mentioned the special abilities of the vehicles. I think they're all pretty darn awesome. When it comes to the abilities that you pick up, most of them are good. There's some that are pretty bad. Like the mines, I found that only I drove over mines, even if they were my own, right? You could lay down mines, and that doesn't mean you can't hit your own things. You absolutely can. So I would drive over it, and it would do a good amount of damage. I never saw the enemy drive over a mine in my entire playthrough of this game. I did hit multiple of them with like the rear attack, though. The homing thing is really good. There's some special abilities that are really, I think, almost overpowered versus other ones. But there are some ones like, I don't know if it's the freeze one is the one that everybody hates. I'm pretty sure it is. The freeze missile that literally just locks you there. There are some times where you will be stuck for whatever reason, and I think sometimes it was just the game. I'm not 100% sure. Maybe I just got hit by freeze missiles way too often. You will just sit there, and you'll be sitting there longer than you can ever imagine you'd be sitting there, and you cannot move. I would press every button in the book, and there's not even that many buttons. I'd press every button to move forward, back, turn, anything, and you literally would just stay there. Now, luckily, the AI, again, isn't all that intelligent, so they won't take full advantage. Also, it is kind of hard. Like, it's hard to aim because you're in a vehicle and you're moving and they're moving. So it's not always easy to, like, even if you're directly in front of somebody, you might feel the urge to, like, turn a little bit because you are driving. So it is hard to, like, nail direct shots. It's hard to nail special abilities. It's hard to nail anything that doesn't, hone in on the opponent. So I understand it, I guess, to a degree, but there'll be too many times that I froze in place. All right, let's talk about the ending, because I find the ending to just be fascinating and maybe the most interesting part of the entire game. Again, I didn't get there, but I have to use the help of other people to do it. So you beat the game and you get a seat at Calypso's table, like I said. And so again, the idea is Calypso's like this all-powerful being, and he's able to grant you whatever wish you choose. And I believe you give it to him on a scroll, because that's in the Lost ending. He gets like a scroll, which like you already had a prior request, and then he just reads it afterwards. It's a little odd. So some things to note with this is the difference. So they filmed live action endings for, I believe, I think every character. Every character did get a Lost ending, but I think 2 of them you don't actually see the character. A lot of them you do. A lot of them you see the character that's supposed to be driving the car. And I will say, it's funny to see some of them because they are just characters that you wouldn't exactly imagine would be able to pilot or drive that vehicle and would actually be able to win. You also have to think, you literally murdered everybody. And I think that's why Calypso does like gotcha things to a lot of people, right? So jumping to the end, most of the endings, most of the requests, Calypso will be like a kind of like an evil genie where like they give you your wish, but like they're either too specific, right, or they kind of like do one small little change to your request that kind of screws you over. A lot of them are like that. Not all of them, but a lot of them are like that. And I like that quite a bit. I think that's that dark kind of atmosphere to it. So that's one thing that you get. But they filmed live action endings and they cut them. So there is no live action ending in the game, including like this one, the PS1 game that you can play right now on PS4 and 5. You just get the text. Now you can see the lost endings, okay? They released them, I think, later on in a different game or some bonus feature thing, and they are interesting. So let's talk about the lost endings first. They are campy. They are cheesy. There's a lot of them that are truly atrocious. I kind of like it. I also kind of don't like it. Like, it's just one of those things where it's like, it's so bad it's good. I think that's probably how it is. I know, like reading the comments of the video that had them all, it's like people leaned into it and really did enjoy it. I think some of them are pretty good. I think some of them are pretty clever in terms of what was asked or in terms of what Calypso does to the person. Calypso, like, if you don't stare too hard, does look cool, has this like burned off, like a Harvey Dent thing, but if the entire face was like that. But then he has like the wig, and you could like see, like, he's got like a thing around his face, like where the wig would actually go. It's so poorly, it looks so bad. It looks so bad, and a lot of it does look really, really bad. I think in some of them you can actually see like the microphone that they're capturing the audio from. David Jaffe is the voice of some of the characters in it, so it is pretty all over the place. The acting is, I'd say for the most part, it's atrocious. I think Sweet Tooth, okay, well now the actual like Needles Kane, I think he actually is maybe one of, if not the best of all of them, because he is just so wacky and weird. And that probably has to be the origin, because you can write how a character is supposed to, and you get like a little bio of all these characters. But then when you actually get to see him, it's not the mask we're used to. It's not the mask we even get in the Twisted Metal show. I actually much prefer the new mask to, that mask. But it kind of takes you back to the origin. Like, that was their general idea for him. He still looks cool. He just looks very, very different. And I like him. I like him a lot. I think, again, he's one of the better characters in it. But overall, I would say it's something you got to kind of see to believe. Some of the dialogue is just outrageously bad. Some, like, the responses to characters or screaming that characters will do, Calypso included. It is, I would say the girls in front of him are probably the best actors of the entire group. And they do actually talk a little bit, so it's not like they just stand there. I think they are the best just overall. But again, maybe it's supposed, I assume it's supposed to be like that. But there is some dark, sinister stuff. Again, there's examples of one guy, I think he's like a lieutenant. He sent like in the past tense, he sent all his men to die on accident, right? Like, he told them to do something, and he wants to be set back in time to stop that from happening. So he gets sent back in time, and then he dies. Now, okay, this is actually a good example here. One thing I find very interesting is the endings, a lot of them actually, will differ depending on which one you do. So the lost ending versus the text ending, the official ending of this game that I played, are different. And some of them will literally be like, not what they want, right? So each character has a request that Calypso has to grant, right? The want, I believe, is like always the same. But the response and how things kind of play out is very different in writing versus live action. A few times, it's better in live action. I think Sweet Tooth is actually an example. Better in live action than it is in just text. But most times, I would say they kind of took the text and then they did some really weird stuff where, like, they're just not the same. They're not the same at all. There's one ending where a person actually dies. That she dies in front of Calypso. He murders her. Versus the text ending, she doesn't. She actually kills him. So it's literally the exact polar opposite. She's I believe, an assassin for hire by the people of LA. Oh, by the way, let me throw this out here. The text writing is atrocious. It has words like doubled. Like, I'm not an English major, and I don't think I'm all that good at speaking, in terms of like the correct grammar and all that stuff, or even typing it. I'd have to like look it up. How this was written is like beyond it is so bad. It was written from somebody who does not know how to write, and maybe again that kind of adds to it. But just to throw that out there in terms of how the words are actually arranged in sentences. But some of them will be that different. She dies by him in the live action. In the text, she literally kills him. And then some of them, it's like, because the way the video that I watched is it would show the live action first, and then it would show the text second. And so some things I would say is like, okay, well, I understand what they were going for in the live action, but I think the text actually kind of does, because you don't actually get to see it. You can actually, it's one of those things where it's like you're imagining it. When you imagine, I think Mr. Grimm is maybe a good example, or there's was it maybe Darkseid? One of the characters, I think it's Darkseid, literally is trying to capture this demonic entity that Calypso has in like almost like a genie. Like he's got literally like a little vase or whatever, and in live action, he opens it up and he's trying to like suck the soul of this thing in, so he takes it away. And in live action, it's horrible. They use like fog on the demon, and the demon doesn't look very good, let's just say that. And they're like doing like a spasm thing, and then they kind of just like slowly like drop themselves, and then they close the vase, and the vase is like lighting up green. It looks terrible. But then when you read it, you say, okay, well, because I'm not seeing it, it could be anything. Like you can imagine this vase opening and like the soul of this thing being sucked into it, right? Or even like you can just picture Aladdin and picture that, right? So I think that is better, because I think you can kind of just imagine things more. There's one character that I think it's the cop asks for basically Twisted Metal to end, no Twisted Metal anymore, and Calypso's kind of one up on the guy is, well, I'll send you to a place where there's no Twisted Metal. There's really no anything, though. And he sends them literally to outer space. Now, in live action, these girls open the door, and it's just black. It's literally just black. You don't even know what. So you imagine, I guess, it's like a dark void. In the text ending, it's actually not even implied. It's shown. It's outer space. He sends you literally into outer space, because there is no Twisted Metal competition in outer space. Get it? So I like the creativity there, and I actually like the text ending. So it's pretty interesting. I think I prefer the text ending, even though it's really the first couple paragraphs are the exact same paragraph for any character, right? No matter what, it's the same opening, and then everything else is obviously different. And yeah, the writing is atrocious, but I think because you can kind of let your mind tell the story a little bit more, or show you the story, I think it's better than seeing it, because then you see the low production and all that stuff. And again, there's some coolness to it, but it's not all that amazing. So there you go, my extremely long impressions of Twisted Metal. I don't even know how to how to end this thing. It was quite a game. It was quite a video game. I'm glad I played it. Maybe I should have said that. I think I've said it in past videos, but I didn't say in the beginning of this one. Never played it. Never played it. I played Twisted Metal Black as a kid, a young kid. Tell that story in a different video, but that's the only Twisted Metal game besides the 2012 PS3 game. Those are the only two I've ever played. So I never played 1, never played 2. So I'm excited to play 2, because I think 2, from what I read, has more kind of lore to it. I think it probably should look and feel a little bit better. Maybe I can actually beat it versus the first game. So I'm excited to get going into that game, and I'll make a video next week on that. Let me know what you think. Make sure you're subscribed, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.